right, so we'll go ahead and get things rolling here. We have 30 minutes. We always like to do these webinars as kind of very short and concise. Folks are busy, but we will be recording this so that we can share it with everyone joining here, as well as those that weren't able to join at the start. But as I mentioned here, we're excited to introduce tactics. And here at Elate, we've got a very big vision of being able to connect long-term strategy with tactical execution. For us, it's about how do we come alongside organizations in the way in which they build, execute, and review their strategy itself. A lot of the pain that we look to solve for stems from our founding team's own past experience. And with that, I'll kind of introduce myself. My name's Brooks. I'm one of the co-founders here at Elate. I'm also going to be joined by Jacey, who leads customer solutions here on our team. We're going to start with high-level agenda, introducing tactics, and specifically the genesis for why this was a feature we were so passionate about, and frankly, one that was inspired by the customers that we work with, as well as the strategy and operations leaders that we have the opportunity to partner alongside. But we'll get into a little bit of the why, what we're seeing in the market landscape as a whole, transition into a demo of the feature itself. Again, it's going to be a very short demo, but we at least want to start to bring to life how tactics are helping so many organizations connect long-term vision with tactical execution. And then we'll speak to specifically a customer that has introduced tactics and the value that they've seen. So Jacey is going to be able to touch on that. And we'll wrap up today's session with just a Q&A. We'll try to keep it tight to about 5 to 7 minute QA session. So if you have questions as we're going through this, feel free to drop those in the chat itself. But really to start with where we always like to begin, because this is how we build products internally. It's how we think about problems, is we need to start with the why. And where we built the Elate platform was really out of the pain we had felt firsthand as strategy and operations leaders. And if we think about most strategic plans, we're coming up to the fall here where most organizations are going to be there doing their strategic planning. This process is one that is very disconnected and frankly broken for most organizations. I think a lot of companies feel as though they go through strategic planning just to check the box and leave with this great assessment of here's what success is going to look like for the coming year, but there's a failure to launch. Frankly, from Harvard Business Review, 60 to 90% of strategic plans themselves never launch, and roughly 48% fail to even meet half of the targets that are outlined within the strategy. Harvard Business Review overall believes that 67% of strategies ultimately fail, whether it's because they never got off the ground or because they had unrealistic expectations set towards them. And I think that sets the stage for what so many organizations feel right now, which is we spend all this time and energy setting our strategy, and yet there's a disconnect in how that strategy comes to life or isn't even communicated to our employees themselves. I think one of the things we've just heard so consistently throughout 2023 is this idea of priority fatigue. I think employees themselves feel as though everything is a priority and thus nothing is a priority. And because of that frustration employees are feeling, leadership themselves feel that frustration because the initiatives that they're setting out, that they're building within the strategies aren't getting picked up on. They aren't being run with, and employees are spending a lot of time and energy in other areas versus what is it that we're focused on as a company. And I think there's a lot of factors for that. But if we think about even the landscape today, the overall economic on a macro scale is playing a role in this. I think a lot of organizations right now are constrained, whether it be with hiring freezes, whether it be with budget constraints, or even potentially layoffs. What that is doing is it's putting more and more emphasis on employees taking on those priorities and being able to discern what is it that truly matters. We've got technology challenges where a lot of organizations are peeling back on technology spend itself. They're starting to really ask the question of like, what is the ROI when we invest in software? Because employees feel as though they've already got too much technology that they have to grapple with today. The other element that we're seeing is because of just the overall weight that's being put on employees and the priorities that they're being asked to take on, there's burnout. There is the quiet quitting that was occurring through 2022. And frankly, in 2023, we have this whiplash effect where for the last decade, all companies have been focused on is growth at all costs. And yet now when we look at the macroeconomic landscape, what we're seeing is a shift towards retention, towards a focus on customers and how do we serve our existing base. We're going to slow down on the net new acquisition and really focus on how do we expand and serve, deliver value to those customers that we have. So that reprioritization that's causing a lot of this confusion as well. So when we take all of these moving pieces into account, again, it comes back to how are we aligning our organization? And for us, tactics was the way that we want to not only set kind of the blocking and tackling, the fundamentals of how we bring our strategy to life, but in a really clear, succinct way, make sure that the work employees are taking on aligns with the mission, the vision, the values, as well as what we refer to as themes. Some organizations call these pillars, but it's really what does success look like for us in 2023? So tactics, as you can see here, is the layer that we are really bringing to the individual employees within these organizations. It is that execution layer where we can connect from tactics to objectives to overall company themes and the goals that they're setting for the year, a way that we've got an alignment or a structure that makes it so that leadership down to individual contributors are all aligned. They're working on the initiatives, the priorities that are contributing to one another. The other area that we want to focus on when we talk of tactics, again, we reference bringing together long-term vision with tactical execution, but there's like 3 specific areas that we have to see come to life and that we really encourage companies to focus on. First of which is alignment. If an employee cannot draw a direct line to how their work is connected to objectives that their team is taking on, and those objectives to the areas of focus that the organization is setting, then naturally that's going to cause a disconnect. It's going to cause employees to be working on different things, not having work that's ultimately contributing to the goals of the organization. The second component is in prioritization. There's not a lack of things to be done. No employee is raising their hand saying, look, I have free time. What could I be doing? They're saying, look, I've got all of this already on my plate. Help me discern as an employee what my priorities should be. Help me to weight value and effort of any work that I'm taking on in a meaningful way that's connecting that execution with directionally where we want to go as an organization. And then the visibility. If I'm going to be aligned, if I'm going to be able to accurately prioritize that work, I need to understand and have that visibility into the single source of truth or that unified view of the strategy itself, which for so many organizations, that strategy lives in siloed technologies. It lives in different spreadsheets or PowerPoint presentations. And so we want to bring together the alignment that drives prioritization through the visibility that we're connecting from start to finish with the employees of an organization. So that's the high level of why we built tactics, what we're seeing in the market, and just the strain right now that so many organizations are feeling, trying to rally folks around the right work that should be taken on. So from there, we'll kind of go into a demo of the Elate platform. And I know for a lot of folks, they might not be on the platform today. So we'll start with a brief introduction to the technology as a whole, but then really bridge that into tactics and how that's going to come to life. So I just went ahead and reshared my screen here. And so with that, welcome to Elate. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is the first time that you're seeing the platform, we want to always orient around this concept of starting with the direction for the organization. For us, that means rallying on mission, vision, values, setting the direction for where we want to go, while also bringing that back to how do we get there? For us, the how we get there takes the form of what I just referred to as themes, where you can set, for a lot of organizations, revenue targets, new features or products, building a best-in-class culture, how we service our customers with the intent that for any theme, we can just simply select that given area of the organization to get the quick definition here at the top of why is this something that we're focused on? But more importantly, how are we as an organization measuring success? So really bringing to life those objectives, the overall status, whether those are on pace, at risk, or behind, the team or part of the organization that is driving towards or measuring the objective itself, as well as those specific owners. So we start with that high level view of where we want to go and how we get there, but it's really the team structure here on the left where that strategy starts to come to life. These teams are tailored towards a specific organization, but in this case, if I navigate into leadership, I'm going to see that these are the objectives leadership is focused on for the regular touch base, whether this is weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It's the intent that these are the top of mind areas of focus that we need to be driving conversation around. As you would expect, if I want to navigate into any specific objective, I can do so just simply by selecting that objective itself. And we're always going to orient towards bringing together kind of that subjective narrative. So the status update, as well as any commentary on how that objective is performing. But because we want to be outcome oriented, not just output driven, we also want to measure the metrics, oftentimes pulled directly from data sources your teams are using, like Salesforce or Monday, to show where we at today against those given goals. However, as we walk through in the presentation and show the visualization of mission, vision, values, connecting all the way down to tactics, we want to bring that visualization to life within the platform. For us, that is where, if you navigate to the bottom right-hand corner, you can see an objective and how it's linked to overall themes or parent and child objectives. But we can also see that within this relationship view, where I can now easily discern, here is how we as a leadership team are driving towards surpassing our revenue goals. And more importantly, how sales, marketing, professional services are all contributing to the ultimate success of this objective. This allows us to navigate down all the way to individuals throughout the organization. But in this case, if I navigate into launching a new website, we can see that this objective is currently on pace. I can see the child objectives underneath, as well as the tactics that I was referring to, owned by different individuals throughout areas of the marketing team. In this example, if I then went from leadership directly to marketing, you would see that similarly, we have our objectives as a team or a department that we are driving towards, but we can also then shift into tactics. And think of these as more of blocking and tackling. For a lot of organizations, setting objectives is done more at a team, department, or even company level. However, when we start to move down to individual contributors, oftentimes these can be a little bit too heavy for what we frankly need to be tracking and identifying within the ultimate delivery of our strategy itself. And so this is where we can quickly see the tactics being taken on by different team members throughout the company. We can also, anywhere there's a yellow flag, see a specific update that's overdue for a tactic. But the other thing that we like to surface for managers or folks managing or leading a team are what we refer to as blockers. We're going to see that blockers are tracked down to an individual tactic level. But frankly, this is what we care about because this is where action needs to be taken. For us, always what we want to have is a bias to action. What do we do about the information that we're looking at, which is why we surface these blockers right out of the gate. But again, if we wanted to navigate into any of these tactics, you're going to see that this is a really lightweight way in which any employee is able to set a specific tactic. Every tactic has to be connected or related to an overall objective that that team is trying to achieve. So in this case, launching a new website to generate marketing leads. But as we can see, we have next steps with specific due dates for those deliverables, as well as those blockers, and when we want to have those blockers resolved by. We also track all of that commentary here below. Best part about Elate is that for most employees, they're never logging into the platform to provide these updates. That entire experience is often driven through the integrations we have with Microsoft Teams as well as Slack. But you can also tag individuals and have that collaboration across different teams or departments and have a succinct view where all of that information, all of that commentary is coming back into the platform. But as you can see here, we have the ability just to select, in this case, updating pillar pages mapped to supporting posts from 3 to 5 directly here. And we can also update any of this status directly here as well within the platform. So it just brings together kind of a succinct way for us to drive that interaction. In this example, let's just say that we all of a sudden closed out all 5 of our pillar pages mapped. We also have the ability to close out a specific tab. So we can say, was this a success, yes or no? How would we rate this on a scale of 1 to 5? As well as add any additional commentary that's going to be supportive of this objective being closed out that a manager as well as that individual can easily review here. So in this case, if we celebrate, get a little confetti notifying us that this tactic was a success, not only is that going to be tracked directly on this team page, we also want to bring this together in a consolidated view where we can report on any tactics across the organization that are being closed out by those team members. You can filter this view to your heart's content based on team performance, average percent complete by individual throughout the organization. But this gives us that view into what's being worked on, how are these being delivered, whether they're successful or not. And we can always navigate into that individual profile to specifically see the progress to date on those individual tactics. So again, always laddering those up in a meaningful way where tactics tie into objectives, which tie into organizational themes themselves and how we're pacing from that point of view. So that's a very quick synopsis or overview on tactics and how it ties into an overall strategy itself. From there, we want to start to bring this to life a little bit more in how customers themselves are seeing this leverage, seeing successfully introducing and rolling this out through the organization. And so as we transition here, Jacey, would love to turn it over to you to kind of get some of those stories that we've seen through customers so far.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that tour, Brooks, of starting to walk us through tactics. Now that we've seen this come to life, let's talk about what this starts to look like with customers today, and more importantly, the results that we're seeing. So like Brooks mentioned at the onset of the webinar, we're working with companies who are really looking to bridge that gap between the long-term vision and the execution. Now, what we start to hear when we're talking about adding in this layer of tactics is that teams want to see the full picture and they want to see the impact of the strategy, but they want to be able to do so in a way that's really streamlined and reduces the noise so that we're not inundating our team with just layers and layers of objectives. When we start to take this approach, we see customers like Form Assembly, which you can see on the slide here, who are really able to start prioritizing what matters most to the business because they're able to place the strategy at the center, at the core for everyone to see. Now, what starts to happen here is that individuals now know where to focus, and they also know how they fit into that plan, because like you saw in the demo, we're able to start building those relationships back up into one view so we can see that full picture. In return, what starts to happen on the other end, so for strategy and operation leaders like yourselves likely on the call, you start to have these insights on the delivery of the objectives with things like blockers being brought to the forefront. So we're not digging and sifting through layers of information to find this, and then really being caught on our heels at the end of the quarter because we weren't able to catch those things early enough. So again, what this does is allows us to start to drive alignment across the board, but it leads to higher achievement of the plan, which is why we're doing all of this in the first place. So as you can see with Form Assembly, with some of the numbers here on the slide, driving this alignment has led them to over 80% objective success rate, which is what we strive for with every customer that we work with, as well as they're able to start closing these out with that 4.2 out of 5, again, closing those out more confidently. So to bring this all home with what we've seen today, we're able to do this and see these results because we're able to bring in things like alignment, prioritization, and visibility with that one holistic view so that we can tie together the long-term vision and the execution. So with that, I know we have about 10 minutes here. Would love to take us to some Q&A so we can start to talk about what this would look like at your organization.
Yeah, and it looks like we're getting some that are going to range from like just overall market landscape and what we're seeing down to some specific product ones. So we'll try to parse through these, but Jacey, I'm going to keep you on the spot here because one that came in here was, I like the idea of taking this down to the tactic or individual level, but my team is also struggling to just build out objectives. How have you seen this done well?
That is the $1 million question. So for whoever asked that question, you are not alone in looking across the board and just understanding and taking inventory of where you are at today. And our answer every time is always to slow down, to adjust, and to avoid doing everything all at once. when we see that organizations are trying to boil the ocean, is how we refer to it, what that comes down to is just false starts across the organization, which many of us know those are really tough to course correct and come back and try to change after we've rolled it out across the organization. So as we think about a team that may be struggling to build objectives, we believe in taking a very phased approach, going layer by layer through the organization to do this. And you all know your organization's best. Every company is very unique, so this is going to look different for everyone. But our general guidance is, again, start with defining the mission, vision, values, and making sure you have very clear themes so that the entire team can really anchor around the top priority and answer the question of where are we going. From there, we're able to take it to the next layer of likely going to the executive team, allowing them to build really strong objectives that are in alignment with your themes or your pillars, starting to model what that looks like, but also making sure after we build those objectives that we're allowing time, likely spending a quarter, to make sure that that team is able to execute with a really strong and consistent review process. When everyone on the team is able to understand the process, the expectation, and the impact that that's going to have, this is just going to carry as we add in additional layers with divisions, departments, whatever that looks like at your organization, and the tactics will just start to be included within those layers. So long-winded way of saying, be patient, be intentional, adjust along the way, but definitely make sure that we have those strong objectives built before we start to layer in those tactics.
I love that. And yeah, we very much take that approach of crawl, walk, run, and in rolling this out, getting the buy-in, we have to start by setting the foundation first and foremost with the leadership team, and then we can build upon it from there. The next question we got was pretty straightforward. How does this differ from project management? So I'll start by saying this: Elate integrates into a number of different project management tools. We are not project management. We do not want to be project management. Frankly, that serves a purpose for a PMO team within an organization. However, what we want to do is very similar to how your PMO team leverages project management tools like a Monday or an Asana. Your sales team leverages Salesforce or HubSpot, engineering on Jira, et cetera, is we want to create a unified view of all of those different tools and the outcomes that are being driven from the teams that leverage those tools themselves. One of the gaps that we often will see is that especially earlier stage organizations will leverage a project management tool to try to track initiatives that are this blend between the work to be done today as well as the long-term strategy. And there very quickly becomes a disconnect between just blocking and tackling and checking off to-dos versus asking the question of how does this align directionally with where are we going? So that's where always we want to orient tactics in a way where we're connecting those to objectives as well as overall themes so that we can have that outcome orientation. Most project management tools are not leveraged across the entirety of the organization. That being said, tactics, and especially the ease or the frictionless way in which we roll that out, especially through those integrations we have with Slack and Microsoft Teams, allows us to create one unified view of how every different tactic and objective is linked together, how we map those different dependencies so that as strategy and operations leaders, we can identify those bends within our plan before they become breaks. We can actively see what's working and what's not. And so creating that holistic view, but being very data-driven and outcome-driven is where we want to focus. So it's not just about tracking items to be done. Frankly, if your PMO team wants to do that, Monday or something of the like is a great tool to do it. We want to give context to how that project is tied into the bigger landscape of things within the strategy itself and the delivery of that. Okay. The next one we've got is, what is the typical size of organization that have implemented tactics thus far? Is there an ideal organization size for this solution? So I'll touch on it on a high level, and then Jacey, I'm curious if there's like specific stories or pieces that you've seen work really well. We've rolled out tactics to organizations that are 100 employees and below, and organizations that are well into the tens of thousands. The one thing that we know to be critical is that we have to set a strong foundation and get the buy-in and the operating rhythm with leadership, management, and then individual contributors. Quite frankly, if we try to roll out tactics to all individuals without first being able to communicate, why is this something that we're now introducing? You're gonna have rejection at the immediate entry point. Like, they're not gonna understand, why am I getting yet another tool that I got to use day to day, week to week? Most employees, the feedback that we have heard in the maybe shying away from like a performance management tool or a goal tracking tool is that employees just feel as though they're punching a time card saying, yes, I did work this week. What we have to orient around is setting the foundation of why are we introducing another solution and what is the value to that employee. By being able to surface next steps, but more importantly, blockers to their managers, to their team leads, it allows employees to have a voice, to be able to say, here's the work I already have on my plate, but how that work is either blocked by things outside of my control, or how you can help me remove those hurdles themselves. And so I would say that the key element, regardless of company size, is there has to be that buy-in at the leadership or the management level for then employees to really find that value, because they know, if my manager's looking at this day after day, week after week, I'm going to put my blockers in there because you're going to help me be more successful. And I'm going to know with confidence that my work is aligned to the organization. So that's kind of the high level of how we think about things. Jacey, I went on a bit of a monologue there, but anything else you'd add to that?
No, that's perfect. I think you said it really well, Brooks. It's less about the size and more about where you're at in that journey, and ensuring that you've set that foundation. And even what you started to hit on, Brooks, at the end of it, of adding in that layer of blockers. I think about it as a way for your employees to raise their hand and let you know about things that are happening in execution, so that we can all then take those actions moving forward.
Yeah. The next one we've got here is pretty straightforward. Tactics equals projects, ? Or tactics equals tasks. And what I would say is that tactics in and of themselves are not, the next steps are oftentimes kind of the tasks to be done, or like the next steps that have to occur for a specific tactic. That being said, the tactic in it itself is oftentimes like a very like complete, not complete, or show me where we're at on the progress to complete and how that ties into an objective being delivered upon. In the example we used of launching a new website, we know there's a lot of moving pieces that have to happen for a website to be launched. We have to have pillar pages. We have to have SEO strategy. We have to have our content written. All of those are items, they're projects, they're initiatives that are taken on by team members from your content marketing team, from your SEO side of the business, but they are all intricate pieces or dependencies that allow us to launch that website itself. So I would say in that concept, think of tactics as these are the blocking and tackling items that have to be done. And then the tasks that fall underneath those are more of the next steps, where we have very clear due dates or deliverable dates that are assigned to those. Okay. And this is probably someone who's leveraged the tool itself. How do I physically link a tactic to Jira, Trello, Asana, or some other work stream that's related to the tactic itself? So we do have integrations within the Elate platform. They are pre-built, so you can log in with username and password, or through single sign-on with Microsoft, Google, Okta, or something of the like. But the progress to complete and how we track those within a tactic or an objective is set up by connecting that data source. Monday is probably the most commonly used progress to complete tracker that we have that's connected to Elate. But you can connect any of those to an objective as either a key result, so a deliverable to that, or to track that progress to complete for a tactic itself. Okay, I know we're right at the time, but the last question that we've got here is just oriented around, like, from our perspective. So the wording of this is a little different, so I'll kind of paraphrase what I think it's asking. How do we think of tactics and strategy ultimately being introduced at an organization? I think this is kind of what Jacey was touching on. We don't try to do all of it right from the onset. It has to start by first aligning on the strategy at a leadership level. that is where we must begin, because if we're setting tactics before we have a strategy to connect those tactics into, then quite frankly, we're just doing a lot of work, having a lot of outputs without an orientation of like, well, what does this mean for the way that we're driving towards successful outcomes across the organization? I will say that one of the things that we very clearly see tactics start to alleviate are silos within a company. So a lot of times this work that's being done is tracked in spreadsheets or project management tools or different task-oriented type of technology that has no visibility or interconnectedness to other parts of the organization. We need to be able to create a way to have that unified view where now sales, marketing, engineering, or our content marketing team, they understand these different moving pieces and connect their tactics across different teams and different departments so that we can raise our hand and identify blockers so that we can clearly not just set next steps, but even tag individuals that we know are going to be really paramount in being able to deliver on that tactic itself. So we will say that oftentimes we can't just jump into tactics. We're putting the cart before the horse there. We have to start with the strategy, make sure that we have that alignment. At Elate, we like to think of it as not just a top-down approach, but bottoms up where we're meeting in the middle. So to do one without the other, we're going to have a significant gap in our ability to go out and execute upon the strategy itself. So again, I know we're right over the time here. For anyone that's interested in learning more about tactics or diving in further, you've got my email directly here on this screen, brooks@goelate.com. I always love having these conversations with folks. It means a lot to us, from the way we build our product, the way that we think our roadmap, to hear directly from strategy and operations leaders, to hear from folks that are considering Elate or those that are on Elate. So I would encourage you all to reach out to me directly, because this is kind of the lifeblood of how we build our product. Again, we come from the background as strategy and operations leaders, so this is something we're super passionate about. If you have ideas of how we can continue to enhance tactics, we'd love to hear it. But thank you so much for taking the time here today with Jacey and I. We really appreciate it.